why asking for help is a sign of wisdom and not weakness. I've noticed a pattern with some of the people I work with. Sometimes something happens. They get upset, discouraged, or frustrated. They're overwhelmed or just don't know what to do. And instead of reaching out for help, they isolate. Then when I talk to them, they'll say something like, I was going to call you, but I know you're busy, even though I've encouraged them to contact me. I usually tell them, don't stay in a negative state for more than an hour. Why do I tell them that way? Things can happen. People disappoint us. Plans don't work out. We get news we're not expecting. We can make mistakes at work, in a relationship, or we're having a bad day. The problem is we can go into a negative state, and we don't need to stay there. Now, a negative state is anything that takes us out of our peace or out of our joy. And sometimes we don't know how to get out of it. And the longer we stay there, the easier it is to find reasons to stay there. It comes down to, what are we focusing on? Here's how it usually plays out. Something goes wrong, and now everything we see is through that what's wrong lens. It can be frustration with a job, which leads to thinking about everything we don't like about the company, or everything the boss has ever done that bothered us, or every time we've been overlooked for something we wish we were doing. It can be a relationship conflict, which leads to remembering what happened 6 months ago, then something from 2 years ago. And then we can start thinking about what might happen next. Before long, we're not really dealing with one problem anymore, but we've built a case. And when someone is in that state, they might think they're evaluating the situation. But what they're actually doing is reinforcing the way they already feel about it. There has been research that helps explain why this happens. Psychologists use the term negative bias to describe our tendency to give more weight to negative information, and negative events can have a stronger psychological impact than positive events. So when something goes wrong, it becomes very easy for our attention to start looking for things that support what we're already thinking is wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean the problems we're facing aren't real. They may be, but we still need to be able to see the whole picture because our brains learn patterns. And there's another part of this that I think is important. For some people, focusing on what's wrong becomes a habit because they've spent years doing it. When something happens, they immediately start to worry and replay it in their mind. Then they think about everything that could go wrong and they withdraw, hoping they'll feel better. Then something else happens and they do the same thing again. And eventually that becomes familiar. Our brains are constantly learning from this repetition. And when we repeatedly think or behave in a certain way, the natural pathways associated with those patterns become easy to activate. That's part of neuroplasticity. No one is permanently wired to think negatively. Their brain has just learned how to do it. It becomes familiar, or should I say the easiest route. Like when we're trying to drive somewhere we've probably gone to hundreds of times. We don't have to think too hard where to turn. We've done it so many times that the route is familiar. Thinking patterns can be familiar too. So when something difficult happens, the brain may go right back to the route it's already familiar with. Telling someone to stop thinking negatively or to think positive isn't going to help because they may not know how. What they need is another route. And sometimes we need someone else to interrupt that pattern. This is where another person can be extremely valuable. Someone objective who isn't too emotionally connected or close to it, as long as they aren't in a negative state. When I'm working with someone who's stuck in a negative state, I like to get to the root cause, to find out what actually happened, what they know, what they're assuming, what they're afraid might happen, or what they're anticipating will happen, and what they might be overlooking. Because once we start separating those two things, the situation can actually start to look different. The circumstances may not change, but now they can process them differently. And sometimes that's enough to get someone moving forward again. This is why I pay attention when someone tells me, I know you're busy. Of course I'm busy. Most people are busy. But if I've already told someone to reach out when they need help, my being busy isn't the issue. They decided they shouldn't bother me. Their problem wasn't important enough. They decided they should be able to handle it themselves. yet they're still in a negative state. And sometimes they've spent hours, days, weeks, or even years struggling with something. We could have worked through it in less than an hour. The real answer has nothing to do with my schedule or me being busy. The truth is, it's hard to ask for help because asking for help can feel like a weakness. They might think, I should be able to figure this out by now. I shouldn't need somebody else to tell me. I don't want anyone to know that I'm struggling with this. It's stupid. And sometimes there's shame involved. I should know this by now. You've told me this before. And sometimes there's pride. They've built a persona around being able to handle things, especially if they're the one people look to solve problems and they feel like they're the one who's responsible. But when they're the one who needs help, they don't know what to do with that. They see needing another perspective as evidence of being incapable or weak. But in many situations, asking for help is actually the wisest decision. Think about how we operate in different areas of our life. If there's a legal issue, we talk to an attorney. If there's an accounting issue, we talk to an accountant. If there's something wrong with the car, we take it to a garage. We don't automatically consider it weakness. We recognize that someone else has knowledge, experience, or perspective that we don't have. So why would we treat processing hard things any differently? And why would we isolate? Because isolation can limit our perspective. And the problem with isolation is that we're left alone with the same information and the same perspective that got us stuck in the first place. If we're thinking about the situation through the same lens, asking the same questions, making the same assumptions, seeing the same problems, we're probably reinforcing the same conclusions. Having another person make the decision for us isn't the answer either. That's avoiding another person often sees something we don't, and they may ask a question that we haven't considered yet. They can tell if we're making an assumption or considering the facts. And they can help us slow down in a situation long enough to get some clarity. It's discerning between being dependent on other people and knowing when another perspective can be valuable. We won't become incapable of thinking or making decisions without input, but the opposite extreme isn't healthy either. Refusing help under the guise of independence is refusing help that's available to us. For instance, if someone's willing to stay in the same negative state, thinking the same thoughts, looking at the same problem, reaching the same conclusions over and over, isn't that the definition of insanity? At some point, something has to interrupt that pattern. That could be a question, conversation, new information, a different perspective from someone else, but something needs to change. We can learn a different route, especially if our brain has learned a pattern over years. We can't expect it to disappear because we recognized it once. Studies show practicing something different can help. So instead of asking what's wrong, we can ask, what do I know? Instead of thinking, what if this gets worse? Ask, how do I know it will? Instead of, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what can I do about it right now? And instead of sitting alone with it for hours, days, weeks, or years, who could help me think through this? Over time, this is how we create another route. We're first learning another way to respond. Asking for help can bring wisdom faster because strong doesn't mean never needing anyone or that we always know what to do, but it's recognizing I'm not seeing this clearly right now. I've been thinking about this for too long. I keep coming back to the same conclusion and I need another perspective. That's not weakness. It's recognizing our limits, the limits of our own perspective. So when I tell someone not to stay in a negative state for more than an hour, I'm not telling them they don't need to struggle, they choose to. I'm saying that if what they're doing isn't helping them move out of a situation, doing something different might. Staying isolated and continuing to think the same way never solves anything. Sometimes the wisest thing we can do is recognize that we're stuck and ask someone to help us see what we can't see on our own.